Beach FM, locals talking to locals.
Welcome, Mike, to the Beach FM General Election Show. Mike, I want to get to know more about the person and also, of course, about the Attica Project that you've co-founded. But firstly, you were born in Wellington. You spent all of your childhood days in Te Bay, now retired and living in Attica. Tell me a little bit more about your upbringing during your formative years. What was it like growing up in those areas?
Right, so I grew up in Te Bay as a youngster. I played lots of sport, enjoyed playing rugby. I followed rugby very keenly as a youngster and got into rep teams as I was growing up. I also played and followed softball quite rigorously. I got to coach a major A team, which was the highest grade back in those days. Te Bay was an awesome place to grow up in. It had a beach, it had forests, it had a bit of everything. Yeah. And as a child, we would spend our holidays and after schools playing around the beach and swimming and learning how to dive and all the stuff that goes with water sports. And you know, as a youngster, I learned the life-saving skills through going to school and going. Back in those days, they had a certificate for them where you achieved certain things and you got stickers and put on your certificate as you achieved things. So it was learning water skills basically, and I learned all those, and it helped me in later life and swimming and diving and fishing.
You have to be able to swim if you're brought up in New Zealand. It's very important.
Oh, for sure, because New Zealand is, every city is within hours drive of a river or the sea, so you do have to learn to swim. And I've got a grandson that lives here in Otaki, not far from me, and he goes down to the river every day after school in the summer, and he's learned how to swim.
Gorgeous.
With his friends, and learned all the water skills that go with swimming in a river. It's
a lovely way to be brought up, isn't it?
Brilliant.
We're very lucky.
Yes, New Zealand has up until now had a very, very, how would I put it? It's not a luxurious life, but it's a very full life, I think. When you're growing up in New Zealand as a child, you have a full life. You experience a lot of things because of the way New Zealand is. It's a small country and you can travel from one side to the other pretty easily within a day. Yeah. And nearly from one end to the other within 2 days. So it's not that big of a country. Yeah. And it's got a lot of diversity. It is a very special place. It's a very special place. I think I've always admired and and looked after that. Yeah. And that is one of my biggest goals. I'll get onto the Attica Project very shortly, but one of my biggest goals is the conservation side of it, and land and water. Yeah. That is one of my fortes, if you'd like to say. Yeah. I'm a very conservation-minded person. Well, we'll jump into that a little bit. So, Attica is a new project, and you have representatives in the Mana and the Attica electorates. Can you give me some background about? You've hinted a little bit about it, but why you formed the project and what its vision is. Okay, both Mike and I were both members of the Outdoors Party, and we got disillusioned with the way things were running there and decided to break away from that party and form our own party. The Attica side of it came from sitting around the table with a group of friends trying to think of a appropriate name. And Attica was the town in Athens where democracy first began. Right. So we picked that name up fairly quick, and instead of calling it a party, we called it a project, because as a group of people, we don't have a leader as such. We all work together for the good of the party, for the good of the country, and the goals that we set. Okay. So it was just the two of you, both of you called Mike. That's going to get confusing for us. It's going to get a bit confusing because it's Mike and Mike. Mike squared. Yes, it is.
So, what are the values of the project? And do you see this? You mentioned that you broke away from the outdoor party. Do you see yourselves as complementary to any party at all, like the Greens, or this is a completely different?
Definitely not complementary to the Greens. Okay. We are totally opposed to most of their policies.
Right.
We are complementary to the Outdoors Party. We aspire to what they stand for, and it wasn't the policies that we were had trouble with. It was the management inside the party and the way the politics was working within that party is the reason we broke away.
Sure. So you have a policy relating to the New Zealand racing industry, and that's not something many parties focus on. Why have you identified that as one of your key issues?
This is one of the key issues that we see. The New Zealand First Party and Mr. Peters have I think they're working on closing down a lot of the race courses and closing down a lot of the racing industry. The racing industry employs a huge amount of people, from breeding of horses. They've showed a little bit on TV just recently of the breeding industry where they're transporting horses backwards and forwards to Australia and America and different countries around the globe. That part of it is huge, the breeding side of it. And that's not the racing side of it. When you come into the racing side of it, you imagine a race day in PABs employing people up and down the country. So to close down the racing industry or to minimise it in any way is going to cost New Zealand a lot of jobs. And for what reason? We don't understand the reason that the Minister of Racing is trying to... we've got a fair idea why it is. It's something to do with the actual race course and, the amount of land that the race courses take up.
So not from an animal welfare point of view, you think?
It's not an animal welfare point of view at all. It's more to do with... I don't know that the minister is trying to close down the racing industry from an animal welfare point of view. I think it's more to do with acquiring the land that is used by these race courses and clubs for race meetings.
So it sounds like you're passionate about racing and keeping the land.
Definitely.
So you're running in the Mana electorate, reside in Attica though. Why Mana? Is that because the other Mike is up there?
Yeah, that is the reason.
Yeah.
So we both live in very close to Attica itself, and we both couldn't sit and run in the same electorate. Yeah. So I've chosen the next electorate over, and it's an area that I'm very passionate about because I grew up there and I've lived most of my life in Porirua and the Mana electorate.
Yeah, makes sense. What are the key issues then for Mana that you think your project could help influence?
At this point, it's the roading, I think. Transport and the roading is one of the key issues. Part conservation one, which I'll talk a little bit about later. But the getting this road that they've proposed and got virtually completed, finished, and maybe a train service as well to the Kapiti Coast.
Right. So are you involved with any other current restorations or plantings or rewilding, anything like that that's currently happening in these areas?
No, not at all. I do have contacts and I do volunteer for several different causes within the Attica electorate.
Mm-hmm. Great. So one of your policies, this is something I just wanted to ask you about with regards to looking at banning pine trees or suggesting banning pine trees and making this available for sheep and beef conversion. But I'm wondering, don't the sheep and beef add to the pollution of the waterways, or is it the proposal linked with a better way to farm the land through other plantings?
The sheep and beef don't add as much pollution to the waterways as pine trees. Mm-hmm. You've only got to look at the recent heavy rain that they had in Northland, and the amount of flooding they had. It wasn't the sheep and beef that caused the flooding, it was the slash off the pine trees flowing down the rivers, off the hills, into the bridges, and causing huge dams. And once the water builds up behind the dams, it floods all the farmland and all the towns and everything else that's behind it.
So I've seen some farming where they don't have your standard field of just grass. There's fields of barley and wheat and all sorts of other different plantings with animals just naturally roaming around within that type of fauna and flora. Is that what you're proposing? Is that the sort of thing that you're looking at?
We are looking at regenerative farming, which is, it's basically feeding the animals the crops that farmers grow. We're looking at getting away from genetically modified crops. We're looking at getting away from poisons, putting sprays on the land. I don't think that's very healthy for anybody. When you look at the rate of illness in New Zealand, I was looking at a statistic yesterday which I can't recall exactly what it is. I'll pull it up for you in a sec. It was to do with the amount of people that have respiratory problems in this country.
Yeah, well, globally, I would suggest.
It was in the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah. Well, there's an issue as well with topsoil, isn't there, globally, not just in New Zealand, but we get rid of the topsoil is there for a reason. We seem to, it's washing away, basically, isn't it?
It is, and it's because when you look at a pine forest, as soon as there's a hill behind Attica here where they've just taken the pine trees off. And a couple of weeks ago we had some heavy rain, and you can see great big landslides have been caused by what they've left behind, what they call the slash off the pine log.
Yeah, I have seen that.
And it's all run down the hill, and it's taken all the soil with it. And that ends up getting into the rivers, waterways, and getting washed out to sea when you get more heavy rain.
It's a fascinating...
So, right, it is to do with topsoil.
Yeah, it is a fascinating subject. We could talk about that
you could talk about the land and the conservation side of it for hours.
Yeah, so this is one of the things that you've got many policies on your website that people can have a look at, and that's one of them there. But aside from the politicking, what can people in the electorate do now, regardless of the general election, do you think, to better their backyard? Do they compost, eat more veggies, plant more native trees, volunteer somewhere, get a composting toilet? What can we do now?
In my garden, I've got a worm farm, so I regenerate compost. That's one of my favourite hobbies, gardening and regenerating, using all the compost that is produced inside the cuttings off the veggies and what have you, and putting it through a worm farm. And it's just one way of cutting down the amount of refuse.
Yeah.
Refuse is a big thing in this country.
Yeah.
And plastics that get the waterways and on the beaches. Whenever I go to the beach these days, whether it's just to take the dogs for a walk or to go fishing, I always collect as much plastic and bits of plastic off the beach that I can, because I think it's that's the danger to the whole ecology of the world, basically.
Yeah, I think we could all do that. If you were to sum up what your project stands for, if you were out canvassing people, what would you? If someone said, "What is it that Attica does?" What would be a few words or a couple of sentences that would describe your project? Sorry.
Number one would be political reform. I think the way that the system at the moment is not fit for purpose. We need to have people in power that are honest and that are straight up. You can't have people running a country that are going through the justice system. How wrong is that?
Well, you tell me.
At the moment, and it's happening on a yearly basis. You get different people for charged with different things. They're meant to be the, I wouldn't say idols, but they're meant to be people we look up to and respect. a body that we look up to and respect. And if we haven't got that leading the country, what does that say to the younger generation? That they could get away with crimes, basically? The reforms need to happen and start from the top down. We're in a funny time in the world where there's a lot of conspiracy theories and things buzzing around, especially on the internet, on Facebook and things like that. I don't buy into them fully, but yeah, my main goal would be to reform the political system so that there is a bit more honesty. Accountability is a number one. People that make decisions should be accountable for that decision.
Yeah.
And any danger or damage that it causes.
Okay. Well, I've got some hard questions for you now. This is I'm getting you ready for the political arena. Are you ready? Some people have tripped up a bit on these. I'm kidding. They're quite innocuous. Don't worry. Would you rather be hot or cold?
Hot. I'm a hot person.
You're a hot person. Are you a morning or a night person?
I'm a morning person. I like getting up early and achieving things through the day.
Now, this is a tricky one. Beach or forest?
Am I allowed to say both?
You can, yes. Would you rather eat sweet or savoury?
Savoury.
What's your favourite savoury?
I like making chicken curries.
Okay. Coffee or tea?
I always drink coffee.
Introvert or extrovert?
I think I'm a bit of an introvert, actually.
Okay. And lastly, classical or rock?
Can I say both again?
Yeah, that's interesting. No, you can say
I like rock, but I also enjoy ballet. So
oh, how lovely! That's a nice mix. No, it's good to be an all-rounded person.
I'm a rounded person. I would describe myself as that.
Well, thank you, one of the mics from the Attica Party. We will we'll be also interviewing the other mic shortly. But thank you very much for joining me today on Beach FM, and good luck with everything.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Catherine.
106.3 Beach FM.